Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and I'm recording this video on a Sunday afternoon. I think it's been at least 3 or 4 months, if not more, since I recorded my last clip. I kind of got busy with work and a bunch of other things. Since then, I've done a few meditation trainings and seminars, which have gone quite well for the company which I work, and also been reading a lot on meditation, but also Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, Tai Chi, a number of other topics. So I thought, you know what, it's time to start sharing again. And what I thought I'd do is to take on a topic today that was part of one of the meditation trainings or seminars that I gave. And it has to do with an analogy to help you understand the difference between what you could call personal improvement versus discovering the self, or personal cultivation, if we will, or self-cultivation. And it's an analogy that is helpful when you are coming from a place where you are reading books on self-improvement, or maybe even you have a coach that helps you by asking you questions about your life and all these kind of things. Or maybe you are even going to the psychologist, or maybe you are even a psychologist or a coach yourself. And so you have a certain frame of reference and a certain paradigm of how to improve, or how to help people, or how to help yourself. And then comes all these notions about Buddhism and meditation, or cultivation of the self, or self-discovery, which are coming from a different angle, really, coming from a much broader paradigm. And I think it's important to understand the differences between the two, because I believe that Buddhism and meditation and Tai Chi and practices of that kind, and also the philosophy behind these, such as the Gitas and the Vedantic texts, for example, are not really interested in psychology or self-improvement as such. They help you improve yourself, but their goal is meant for something different altogether. So in order to explain this, I came up with it was a series of questions that I was asking people as I was explaining this. And the first question that I asked was, what is the differences and similarities between a dream and a nightmare? That was the first question. And so you would start thinking about this, and you would say, well, there is obviously one big difference, which is that a dream is pleasant or neutral, whereas a nightmare is unpleasant, scary, or you experience negative emotions during a nightmare. Whereas in a dream, you are either just kind of confused, or maybe you're having a good time, or it's all the emotional tone and valence of a dream is fairly neutral. But there is one similarity, of course, and that is that in both cases you're asleep. Okay, and this is the crucial point to remember about these, right? So both in the dream and the nightmare, you're asleep, and the difference between the two of those is just the kind of emotional content and the content of the dream or the nightmare, but also the emotional feel that it has to you. So that was the first question, right? So that's recognized. I think we can all understand it. Now, the second question that follows is, say that you find yourself in a nightmare, okay? what are the different ways in which you can stop a nightmare. And so I could think of three, and the first one is to turn it into a dream, right? So you could be having this horrible scary nightmare, and then it flips into a dream somehow, and therefore is not a nightmare anymore. So technically speaking, it's stopped. The second way, and it might be implied in the first one, though not necessarily, is to recognize that it's a nightmare. So you find yourself being chased by, a bunch of wild dogs, for example, and you go, oh, hang on a second, wild dogs don't wear pink tutus, right? And that makes you realize, oh, actually, it's just a nightmare, and by doing so, you've kind of taken the bite out of it, and you might be able to stop it. And then there is a third way, which is to wake up from it. Yeah. So and either voluntarily or involuntarily, you wake up. That stops the nightmare. And to me, that is one way to really illustrate the difference between self-improvement and the areas of psychology, or trying to work with the content of your thoughts so that they are more positive, more constructive, so that you have a more meaningful and rewarding life narrative, so that you are more motivated, that you are more effective in what you do, for example. And self-cultivation or discovery of the self, if you will, or self-realization, that's probably the way to describe it better, which is to realize that all the things that happen in the domain of psychology and thinking and mental stories and memories about who you are, or making your life narrative positive, and all these things are, in a sense, content which could be compared to a dream once you realize the true self. Which is a vantage point from which all these narratives about who I am and I should be thinking positive, or I managed to turn this negative thought into a positive one, are all seen. They are all seen from a vantage point that is akin to waking up. Hence the expression having an awakening, right? Now, enlightenment might be further down the line, but in order to get enlightened, you first need to awaken. And what do you awaken to? You awaken to the fact that everything in the mental realm of going from negative to positive thinking is nonetheless only one small element of being. And so from that perspective, awakening or self-realization encompasses who you think you are, and all these stories and all this positive psychology and improvement or whatever, plus a bunch of other things. Yeah. So in a sense, what you're trying to do when you are working on self-realization is that you are going, you could call it going meta, right? So a meta level is one, you are going one logical sphere above whatever realm you're working on. If you remember the phrase from Albert Einstein, he would tell you that a problem cannot be solved on the level at which it was created, right? You need to go one logical level above. That is, you could phrase that or try to understand that in different ways. You could say that it's kind of obvious that you need to do that, because a problem is only a situation that has not been correctly understood, and while you remain on the logical level at which that confusion was created, you cannot possibly solve the problem. You'll be just chasing your own tail. You need to go and look at it from a meta level. So you jump one logical step above it, and then you look at it, and from that level, you are then able to see different sides of the situation, and by doing that, it's almost like you never really solve problems. As a matter of fact, you only grow beyond them to observe the situations for what they actually are. And the same goes with your mental, with the realm of your mental self. So your mental self is the self that has ideas, has memories, it has a self-image, if you will. It has ambitions, it has regrets. And some of these are positive and some of these are negative. And most of the time when we talk about self-improvement, what we are trying to do is to make it so that our mental realm, it has as much thoughts and memories and things, or whatever you want to call them, on the positive side, and as little of these on the negative side. And then we could call ourselves to be mentally healthy, right? Or being a positive person, or someone with a positive outlook on life, and all these kind of things. What you're trying to do when it comes to realizing the self, or self-realization, is you're trying to go meta on that whole thing. You go one level above, and you are acting as the observer who can observe and witness both the positive and the negative without getting involved in it, because you realize from that meta level that all this world of thoughts and memories and the rest of it is but one small aspect of the larger self. And from that vantage point, then you start to be, you create conditions, or you make it more likely that you become self-realized, and eventually, the broader and deeper that actual self-realization goes, the more likely you are to become enlightened. I wouldn't want to talk too much about that, because I really have no clue what enlightenment really is, but I have started to understand it better and better, and it seems to be a shedding of the personal notion of self, right? So a shedding of your identification with your persona and with your individual identity, so that you can observe it from such a vantage point that you are no longer enmeshed with it, so to speak, and that creates also a certain shift in the way your perceptual reality starts to change. That has started to happen to me. My perception of moment to moment has started to really shift. I have awoken, so to speak, to that fact. So that has started to become very clear, and part of the way that I've done that is through a combination of meditative practices and the study, or the philosophical understanding of what it is that you're trying to do, which you could go in via the classical texts, such as the Gitas, for example. But there are also modern authors that through modern vernacular and modern analogies can take you closer to understanding what that is all about. And they also have some techniques which help you understand what it is that you're trying to get at. It's funny because a lot of these they seem very mundane, right? So because self-realization is outside of the domain of what the thinking mind can understand, because it's just not its job to understand these things. The thinking mind is a knife that is meant to dissect and logically parcel things out. We're going more into depth and clarity of perception, of meta perception. So the thinking mind just looks at these things and it kind of dismisses them as like, this is a waste of time. And of course I would think that, because it's his job to think that way. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it has a certain limited job and a certain limited view of the world out of which you are trying to step. So these avenues, they start to clarify these topics, and there's a few authors. Rupert Spira comes to mind, who goes very deep into Advaita Vedanta and this whole understanding of the true self, so to speak. You have guys like Eckhart Tolle. He's a little bit broader and sometimes a little bit more esoteric. But in essence, you have... my cat is having like a battle to death with her sandbox. So in essence, you have all these avenues, and I think it is important to understand these things for a couple of reasons. First of all, it makes it so that if you want to go into self-realization, you understand the difference between that and self-improvement, because there is a tangible difference. It is also important to understand it because, at least to myself, self-realization seems far more interesting because it goes deeper. It is operating on a much higher causal level than just mentally improving your story. That would be, so if we go back to the dream analogy, you could say that psychology or coaching or the philosophy of positive thinking and all these kind of things, they are concerned with improving things so that they go from a nightmare to a dream, right? Or that they go from a dream to a really nice dream. Whereas self-realization is only concerned with waking you up. And that to me is far more interesting, because once you've awoken, then the quality of the dream doesn't really matter all that much. And you, from that meta level, you can make whatever you want, you can do whatever you want with the dream. And so it's far more powerful. It is acting on what my Tai Chi teacher would call a higher causal level, right? So you can be meddling around with things in that pot of thoughts and whatever, or you can be on the highest possible vantage point that you can grant yourself. And from there, everything becomes a lot more clear, and you can make changes with a lot more ease. Willpower becomes far stronger, so that self-discipline and then just the churn that you need to exercise when you are at the bottom of the causal level is no longer relevant. Things flow in a much more natural way, because you are seeing clearly. Yeah, so clarity of perception becomes a thing on that level. So that's something that I wanted to share, right? Like, so the difference between self-improvement and self-realization is they're very different things. Oh, the other one, of course, is that self-improvement is something that you do. See, when you're on that mental level, it makes sense that you want to improve yourself, improve your mental self and your physical self, because you are trying to obtain something out of that. You think, okay, my life is kind of iffy in this area, so I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to learn these techniques, or I'm going to implement a new routine, or I'm going to start thinking or trying to see things in such a way so that I get X, Y, or Z, right? So I don't have the job that I want, therefore I'm going to start, night school, or I'm going to start applying for a different role or whatever, so that I land in a job that I really like, for example. Or I'm having problems with my partner, or I don't like him or her anymore, therefore I am going to do X so that Y. Self-realization is a kind of you could call it every step of that way, which is not a way, because the self that you really are is always already there. It's more like you just need to shed the confusion around it. But if you want to call it a path, just for the mental understanding, it doesn't follow the cause effect way of doing things, and it doesn't get you anything, so to speak, right? You mostly just lose layers of unnecessary things, and when you do practices that your mind thinks that it needs to do in order to shed these unnecessary layers, what you are doing is you are priming your mind and your body to be in states of receptivity and clarity and tranquility, which invite the kind of insights that eventually result in an awakening and later down the line in becoming what you could call a fully enlightened being or a Buddha or something along those lines. I've come to understand, by the way, that none of these things are esoteric or religious in any kind of way. They are scientific. They are just scientific in a subjective way. So Buddhism is the ultimate subjective science, whereas in the West we cultivate the objective sciences. Yeah. So everything that you read in Buddhism, perhaps even including the I don't want to call it the doctrine, but the idea of reincarnation, are findings that come, or realizations that come when you are very, very, very far in the path of shaping your mind towards ultimate clarity and ultimate understanding of things. So there you have it. That is the difference between self-improvement and self-realization. And I hope that clarifies certain things. I don't think it's a particularly motivating speech or anything like that. I don't know if anybody goes like, oh, now that I get the difference, I'll dedicate my life to, it's like, no. But if you're already on that path, this could, and things are still being mushed around, this could help you make a clear distinction between those two. And from what I've seen out there, most people are still operating on the level of self-improvement. And so the thinking mind is still primary in their lives. And the idea of self-realization hasn't really clicked yet. So I think I might be doing a number of videos to expand on what self-realization is to the degree that I understand it based on my experience. Yeah, so I hope that helps, and I hope to be making some more videos because I miss it, and I think I have a lot to share. Cheers.